June 4, 1942, Midway Atoll, 6:10 hours. Salt spray lashes against the deck of USS Hornet as Ensign William, red, Hall grips the cold metal edge of his TBF Avenger. The aircraft growls beneath him, its right R2600 engine coughing like an old beast waking from sleep. The smell of fuel hangs thick in the air. Deck crews in yellow jerseys shout over the roaring surf and the rising wind. Hall wipes a sleeve across his goggles. This is it, he thinks, the Avenger's first real test. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the Imperial Japanese Navy is closing in. The radio crackles. Avenger 1, you're cleared for launch. Hall braces as the deck officer's flags sweep downward. The plane lunges forward, its heavy frame dragging like it's fighting the very idea of flight. For a second, one awful second, Hall feels the nose dip as the TBF struggles against its own weight. Then the aircraft claws upward, finding lift, soaring painfully into the blue. Behind him, the rest of Torpedo Squadron 8 launches, 6 Avengers in all, the first combat Avengers ever to fly against Japan. But aboard the carriers of the Japanese Kaido Butai, observers watch the incoming formations and laugh. To them, the Avenger looks ridiculous. Broad wings, bulbous fuselage, waddling through the sky instead of slicing through it like their sleek Mitsubishi Zeros. Reports later described Japanese officers joking that the Americans had finally run out of fighters and were sending flying barrels instead. They did not know, could not know, that this slow, awkward machine carried the seeds of their Navy's future defeats. But for now, the mockery is easy. Because what happens next is disaster. As Hall's Avenger dives toward the Japanese fleet, Zero fighters swoop downward like hawks. The first bursts of 7.7 fire rattle Hall's airframe. The canopy vibrates. The Avenger shakes like it's coming apart. His rear gunner, Jack Ferrier, shouts something lost in the wind. One Avenger catches fire instantly. Another spirals downward, trailing smoke. Hall pushes on, forcing altitude down to torpedo release level. He can almost see the shimmering grey deck of the carrier, Akagi, through the haze. But the Zeros are merciless. A burst punches through Hall's starboard wing. Hydraulic fluid sprays across the cockpit. Ferrier stops firing. Jack, Hall calls. Silent. He releases his torpedo anyway, the one act he can still accomplish, and pulls the Avenger upward with every ounce of strength he has left. The Zeros tear into him. A wing shreds. The engine sputters. The Avenger begins to die. Hall guides it into a controlled crash, landing in the water, the fuselage cracking upon impact. By the end of the morning, only one of the 6 Avengers makes it back. For the US Navy, the debut of the TBF Avenger is a catastrophe. For the Japanese commanders watching from their bridges, it is confirmation of what they believed. The new American torpedo bomber is too slow. Too big. Too clumsy. An easy kill. A joke. They laugh over tea that evening, never realizing the punchline won't arrive for another 2 years, when those same flying barrels will bring some of Japan's greatest warships to their knees. But the US Navy has already seen something the Japanese have missed. Even under unimaginable fire, even after taking catastrophic damage, the Avenger survives long enough to strike. Its rugged frame, its long range, its 3-man crew, all hint at potential not yet realized. Potential that will be refined, improved, perfected. And when it returns, it will not be the prey. It will be the hunter. August 1943, Quonset Point Naval Air Station, Rhode Island, 14:20 hours. Rain beats against the hangar roof in a steady metallic rhythm as Lieutenant Commander James, Jocko, Clark watches a line of mechanics swarm over a new variant of the Avenger. This one isn't the battered TBF-1 that limped home from Midway. It's the TBM-1C, leaner in places, reinforced in others, armed with better defensive guns and fitted with updated torpedo racks. Clark paces slowly, boots echoing across the concrete floor. The scent of oil, machine grease, and fresh paint hangs thick in the air. Each Avenger looks massive even sitting still, its folded wings towering above the sailors like steel walls. A young mechanic slides out from beneath the fuselage. "Sir, she's ready for systems check." Clark nods. "Good. The next time these boys fly into combat, I don't want any more Midways." He doesn't say it out loud, but the ghosts of Torpedo Squadron 8 hang in the room. 6 Avengers went in, 1 came back, and the Navy vowed never again to send pilots into battle with weapons not yet refined. The new TBM-1C's strengths become apparent quickly. A reinforced engine mount, self-sealing fuel tanks, stronger armor around the cockpit and gunner's compartment, and most importantly, an improved torpedo, the Mark 13. It no longer runs too deep, no longer fails to detonate, no longer betrays its aircraft. Clark runs his hand along the cold metal skin of the new aircraft. This, he murmurs, is the Avenger they should have feared. Half a world away in Truck Lagoon, Japanese commanders still sit smugly in their wardrooms, discussing the Avenger as if it were an amusing footnote in the Pacific War. They still believe their Zeros can slaughter them on approach. They still trust the might of battleships, Yamato, Musashi, and the heavy cruisers, to withstand any torpedo foolish enough to challenge them. But they don't know what the Americans are building. They don't know the Navy is preparing for a new style of attack, coordinated, massed, lethal. They don't know the Avenger is becoming something entirely different from the slow underdog of Midway. Back in Rhode Island, the storm outside intensifies. A gust of wind rattles the hangar doors. Clark turns to a group of fresh-faced pilots, men barely out of flight school. "All right, gentlemen," he says, voice firm and steady. "You're going to learn how to fly the aircraft that will break the spine of the Imperial Japanese Navy." They gather around the mock-up torpedo rack. The steel cylinder gleams under the overhead lights. "Torpedoes win naval wars," Clark continues. "And this Mark 13, will change everything, but only if the man dropping it is calm, disciplined, and precise." One of the new pilots raises a hand. "Sir, but the Japanese still outmaneuver us in the air." Clark smiles a slow, confident smile. "Not if they're too busy running from Hellcats," he says. "And when they're occupied, you come in, low, steady, invisible until it's too late." The pilots nod. The training intensifies. Simulated low-altitude torpedo runs replace older high-altitude ones. Crews memorize every bolt of their aircraft. Gunners practice blind firing at targets, racing across projector screens. Men climb in and out of cockpits until the motions become instinct. By early 1944, the Avenger squadrons of the Pacific Fleet are no longer a green, untested experiment. They are a machine, a weapon, an inevitability. And as the carriers steam closer toward the Mariana Islands, toward Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, the commanders of the Imperial Japanese Navy still laugh at the idea that these broad-winged American beasts could ever challenge their proud battleships. They will not be laughing for long, because in a matter of months, a wall of Avengers will rise into the sky. And the era of the Japanese super battleship will come to a violent, shuddering end. June 19, 1944, Philippines Sea, 8:17 hours. The rising sun glints off the deck of USS Bunker Hill as a wave of heat shimmers across the steel. Engines rumble, propellers spin, and the smell of exhaust hangs heavy in the morning air. In the cockpit of his TBM-1C Avenger, Lieutenant Harold "Mac" McKinney tightens the chin strap of his leather helmet and glances at his crew. Aviation radio man second-class Thomas Wade, crouched behind him, slams home the final ammunition belt into the ventral gun. Turret gunner Leo Martinez rotates his .50 caliber turret with a low metallic hum. "Ready back here," Martinez calls, his voice crackling through the intercom. McKinney nods, though they can't see him. Far out to the west, the Imperial Japanese Navy is launching its first wave of aircraft in what Tokyo calls the decisive battle of the war. The Americans have another name for it: the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. But the carrier pilots don't know that yet. To McKinney and the 54 other Avengers warming up on the carriers of Task Force 58, this is simply another mission: torpedoes loaded, fuel tanks full, the Mark 13 warheads gleaming under their shrouds. The flight deck officer steps forward, gives the signal, and the first Avenger thunders down the deck. Then another. And another. The whole air group lifts into the sky, engines roaring like a pack of hunting beasts. The hunters arrive. 20,000 feet above, Japanese radar officers aboard the carriers Shikaku, Zuikaku, and Teiho stare at their scopes in disbelief. Dozens, no, hundreds, of American aircraft are coming, Zeros scramble, pilots rushing from their ready rooms, clipping on oxygen masks as they sprint. But the Avenger pilots do not flinch. They have Hellcats flying above them, weaving a protective net across the sky. For the first time in the war, the Japanese find themselves on the defensive. And the moment the first Zeros hit the incoming American strike groups, everything falls apart. Hellcats tear into them. A dogfight explodes across the clouds. Black smoke trails down toward the sea. McKinney watches Tracer fire flicker above him like lightning. "Let the Hellcats handle 'em," Wade mutters nervously. "They will," McKinney replies. "They trained for this." The Avengers dive, slow, heavy, methodical, toward the Japanese fleet. And suddenly, the commanders who once mocked the aircraft find themselves staring upward in horror. The flying barrel has returned. And it is not alone. The first kill. The battleship Hio turns sharply to port, her massive wake splitting the sea. Anti-aircraft guns open up, filling the air with black bursts. The noise is deafening, a constant wall of thunder. McKinney steadies his Avenger at 750 feet. "Martinez, you see her." "Dead ahead, sir. She's turning, but not fast enough." The torpedo release light glows steady green. 3, 2, 1, drop. The Mark 13 slips free, splashing into the sea with a plume of white spray. McKinney pulls upward, engines screaming. Behind him, the torpedo arms, steadies, and begins its deadly run. A few seconds later, a column of water erupts against Hio's hull. The shockwave rolls across the sea, fire blossoms along her deck. Martinez cheers. Wade slaps the side of the fuselage. But McKinney doesn't celebrate. He looks back at the burning Japanese carrier and feels something else. This is what the Avenger was built for. Across the sky, other torpedo bombers are scoring hits. Cruisers, destroyers, support ships. And though many torpedoes miss, many do not. By sunset, the Japanese fleet is bleeding. A carrier sinks. Another limps away, broken. The pride of the Imperial Navy is shattered. The Avenger, once mocked, has begun its rise as the most feared torpedo bomber in the Pacific. But the deadliest blow is still months away, waiting in the dark waters of Leyte Gulf. October 24, 1944, Sibuyan Sea, 10:43 hours. The sky is a dull grey curtain as tropical rainstorms drift across the water. Sheets of mist whip across the deck of USS Intrepid while torpedo crews shout over the rising wind. The air tastes of salt and aviation fuel. In the cockpit of his TBM Avenger, Lieutenant Commander Robert Dutch Kimball adjusts the straps on his Mi West and peers toward the horizon. Even from miles away, he can see it. A dark silhouette that seems too massive to belong to any ship afloat. "Jesus, Wade," his radio man mutters. "That the Musashi?" Kimball doesn't answer. Everyone in the Pacific Fleet knows the name. Musashi, the sister ship of Yamato, the heaviest battleship ever built. She is armed with 9 18.1-inch guns, each shell large enough to obliterate an aircraft on impact, and armored with steel thick enough to shrug off most bombs the Allies can throw. But not torpedoes. Not enough torpedoes. And today, the US Navy has brought more Avengers than Japan ever imagined possible. The approach. "Avengers form on my wing," Kimball radios. We go in low, below the flak bursts, below the primary guns. The formation tilts downward, slipping under the volcanic black blossoms of anti-aircraft fire. The water below churns white from the turbulence of their engines. And then Musashi comes into full view. She is impossibly large, an armored island surging through the sea, escorted by destroyers firing everything they have. Water columns leap dozens of feet into the air as shells crash around her. She plows forward through them like an animal refusing to die. "Steady," Kimball calls over the intercom. "Pick your drop point and commit." Martinez rotates his turret, scanning for incoming Zeros, but there are none. The Japanese air cover has been torn apart earlier in the day. Musashi now stands alone. The Avengers swoop lower, skimming the surface. In the cockpit, Kimball feels sweat roll down his back. He imagines the Japanese officers aboard Musashi, the same type who once laughed at early reports of the TBF. men who believed no American torpedo bomber could reach a super battleship alive. Today those men are watching death fall from every direction. The torpedoes strike. Kimball lines up the shot. On my mark, steady, steady. With a thud, the Mark 13 releases, plunging into the churning water inches from the ship's port side. Pull up, Wade yells. Kimball yanks the control column, the Avenger straining violently as it climbs. Below them, the torpedo slices forward, slow, reliable, relentless. Musashi tries to turn. But she is too big. Too heavy. Too slow. The explosion is deafening. A massive column of seawater erupts against her armor, lifting debris the size of trucks into the air. The ship lists slightly. Then more torpedoes hit, dozens throughout the day, from waves of Avengers launched again and again. Flames crawl across her deck. Her massive guns fall silent. One by one, her compartments flood. Still she fights to stay afloat. Still she refuses to surrender her pride. But even a giant can blade. And the Avengers are merciless. The moment the legend dies. By late afternoon, Musashi is leaning heavily to port, her bow nearly submerged. Destroyers circle frantically, trying to rescue survivors as she slows to a crawl. Kimball circles overhead, watching the end through thick smoke. Then, without ceremony, the impossible happens. The largest battleship in the world rolls onto her side, slowly, mournfully, and begins to sink bow first into the deep. Her stern rises into the air like a drowning titan reaching for the sky. Sailors leap into the oil-slick water as she disappears beneath the waves. The sea closes over her. The roar of the boilers dying echoes like thunder. And then silence. The ship that once symbolized the invincible power of the Imperial Japanese Navy is gone. Not from gunfire. Not from naval artillery. But from the torpedoes dropped by the aircraft Japan had once mocked. Kimball exhales, finally letting the tension leave his shoulders. "Hell of a job, boys," he says quietly. "You just brought down a giant." The Avengers form up and head back toward the carriers, low on fuel but rich with a realization. The age of battleships has ended. The era of naval aviation and the Avenger rules now. October 26, 1944. Aboard the Japanese flagship Yamato, 6:15 hours. A thin morning fog drapes itself across the water as Admiral Takeo Kurita stands on the bridge, gripping the railing with white knuckles. His uniform is wrinkled, soaked with sweat and salt. His eyes, once sharp with quiet confidence, now flicker with disbelief. 2 days have passed since Musashi sank beneath the Sibuyan Sea. 2 days. But the shock still lingers like a physical weight pressing against every man aboard Japan's remaining ships. Kurita's staff officers whisper behind him. "The Avengers again," one mutters. "Impossible, how do so many survive the approach?" says another. A younger lieutenant answers in a hushed voice. "They come in low, sir, too low for the big guns, and the enemy fighters, the Hellcats, they shred our interceptors before we can reorganize." Kurita knows this. He also knows something far worse. Japan can no longer stop them. Not the planes. Not the torpedoes. Not the carriers that launch wave after wave without rest. His fleet is no longer a strike force, it is prey. He looks out over the grey sea where Musashi once sailed, her absence a wound so vast it feels like a hole torn in the Empire's soul. For years, the Imperial Navy had placed its faith in steel, thick armor, massive guns, the doctrine that battleships decide wars. But the ocean has become a different kind of battlefield. One where an aircraft barely larger than a fishing boat can cripple a Leviathan. And not just any aircraft. The Avenger. Kurita closes his eyes, remembering the intelligence reports from 1942, the ones confidently stating that the TBF was too slow, too bulky, too fragile. The Americans waste resources, a senior captain had laughed. These torpedo planes are nothing. He had laughed too. No one is laughing now. The last approach. On the horizon, engines rumble, distant but growing. Kurita's officers turn toward the sound. Aircraft inbound, a lookout shouts. Bearing 90, many aircraft. Another wave. More than 40 Avengers this time, escorted by an iron wall of Hellcats. Kurita's jaw tightens. He watches them break through the haze, dark silhouettes, their wings low, steady, unwavering, like predators gliding in for the kill. The ship's anti-aircraft guns open fire, spewing orange blossoms of flame into the sky. Shells explode in black clouds, the acrid scent of burnt cordite drifting across the decks. But the Avengers do not scatter. They do not break formation. They keep coming, gliding along the surface barely above the waves. Kurita grips the railing harder. They fly like they own the sea, one officer whispers. They do, another replies. The strike that ends an era. The Avengers rise just enough to cross the wave tops, then dip again into their torpedo runs. Destroyers pivot desperately. Cruisers unleash storms of anti-aircraft fire. But the Americans are too disciplined, too coordinated, too many. The first torpedoes hit a heavy cruiser in Kurita's center line. A second wave cripples a destroyer. A third strikes Yamato's escort, lifting part of the hull clean out of the water. The Japanese formation dissolves into chaos. Kurita feels each impact like a hammer to the chest. These pilots, he mutters, voice trembling, they fight without fear. Then an older officer behind him speaks the words none of them want to hear. No, Admiral, they fight with training, and they fight with carriers that will never run dry. Another explosion rocks the fleet. Kurita stares across the sea, watching the Avengers peel upward into the sky, their torpedo racks empty, their engines clawing for altitude before the return to their carriers. He realizes something profound, something devastating. Japan never understood its true enemy. Not the aircraft, not the torpedoes, but the industry that built them faster than Japan could sink them. And at the center of this industrial avalanche stands the Avenger, once mocked, now unstoppable. A quiet acknowledgement. As the American planes vanish into the clouds, Kurita lowers his head. Tell the fleet, he says softly, prepare to withdraw. No one argues. No one hesitates. The Imperial Japanese Navy has fought its last true battle. And on this morning, amid smoke, shattered steel, and the bodies of ships slipping beneath the waves, the final realization settles across every surviving commander. The torpedo bomber they laughed at has ended the era of battleships. And with it, Japan's hope of victory. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoy World War II stories and want to join me on future journeys, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Your support gives me the motivation to bring you even more high-quality content. See you in the next video.